first story, we're talking about something that should have all of us paying attention. ICE wants to expand its surveillance of social media. Yeah, you heard that right. They're trying to keep even closer tabs on what people are saying about them online. So, what's going on? Let's break it down. All right, so this report comes from The Intercept, and here's the deal. ICE is looking to hire a contractor to monitor social media posts that are critical of the agency, its agents, and its operations. They claim that they're doing this because of an increase in threats. Now, whether that's true or just an excuse to ramp up surveillance, that's a big question. Or is it really? Basically, this contractor would be responsible for collecting info on people who post negatively about ICE, looking into their past social media activity, and even trying to predict if someone has a so-called proclivity for violence. And get this monitoring could include tracking down a person's real identity, address, social security number, work or school info, and even their family members. Wild, right? Now, if you're thinking, wait a minute, isn't this just another way for ICE to intimidate activists and immigrant communities? You're not alone. Cynthia Rodriguez from Mi Gente, a group that fights for immigrant rights, is calling this out for what it is: mass surveillance. And let's be real, ICE has a long history of using tech and social media to keep tabs on people, especially immigrant activists who challenge them. But here's where it gets even darker. While ICE has already a contractor doing some social media monitoring, a company called Giant Oak, this new effort seems even more aggressive. There's even mentioning of facial recognition being used to track people down. And if you think this is just about undocumented folks, think again. The report suggests that ICE could be scanning the online speech of US citizens as well. So yeah, this affects all of us. Now, let's put this into context. This push for more surveillance is happening at the same time that Trump's administration is carrying out massive deportations, some of the biggest in US history. We're talking military flights and even deportees being sent to Guantanamo Bay. Yeah, Guantanamo, the same place used for terrorism suspects. This isn't just business as usual. This is an escalation. So, what can we do? First, let's stay informed. The more we know, the more we can protect ourselves. Second, be mindful of what you post online, especially if you're directly involved in activism. And third, let's have each other's backs. ICE is counting on people being too scared to speak up, but we know that when we come together as a community, we are stronger. That's it for today's first story, but don't go anywhere. We've got two more major stories coming up. If you have thoughts on this specific story, drop a comment below, a voicemail on my website, or hit me up on social media, and let's keep the conversation going. For our second story, we're diving into Florida's new immigration law, the one being called the strongest state immigration bill in the country. But let's be real, what does that actually mean for immigrants in Florida and beyond? Let's break it down. So here's the deal. After weeks of political infighting, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just signed a tough new immigration law. This bill is packed with stricter penalties for undocumented immigrants and gives law enforcement even more power to work with federal immigration authorities. And if you're wondering why now, well, it's all about Trump. Florida Republicans made it clear this bill is meant to align with Trump's mass deportation plans. The bill originally faced pushbacks even from Republicans because DeSantis wanted total control over immigration enforcement in the state. But in the end, they worked out a deal, and now we've got a law that, one, boosts funding for local law enforcement to crack down on undocumented immigrants. 2, strips in-state tuition for dreamers, meaning thousands of students might have to drop out. 3, increases penalties for undocumented immigrants who commit crimes. 4, requires maximum sentences for gang-related crimes committed by undocumented people. And 5, creates a felony charge for any undocumented immigrant caught voting. One of the most extreme parts, a mandatory death penalty for undocumented immigrants convicted of murder. Even some Republicans are saying, that's probably unconstitutional. But supporters don't seem to care. They're pushing it anyways, knowing full well it'll be challenged in court. And if you're thinking, this sounds expensive, doesn't it? Well, you'd be right. Florida is set to spend at least $300 million to enforce these new rules. Meanwhile, Democrats are arguing that immigration is a federal issue. So why is Florida footing the bill? But at the end of the day, the pressure to support Trump's immigration crackdown was apparently just too strong for Republican lawmakers to ignore. So what does this mean for our community? Well, for one, Dreamers in Florida are now at serious risk of losing access to affordable college. And 2, this law makes it even easier for law enforcement to target undocumented people, whether they have a criminal record or not. But let's be real, this fight isn't over. Laws like this are meant to scare and intimidate immigrant communities. But that's why it's more important than ever to stay informed and connected. Know your rights, keep up with what's happening, and most importantly, don't let fear silence you. That's it for our second story. But again, don't go anywhere. We've got one more big story coming up. If you have thoughts on this current story, then hit me up and let's talk about it. For our third and final story of the day, over 400 employees were just let go as part of a sweeping effort by the Trump administration to shrink the federal government. Let's break it down. Here's what's going on. DHS just fired hundreds of employees across multiple agencies, including FEMA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. Officially, the administration says that they're cutting on non-mission critical personnel to eliminate waste and incompetence. But get this, some of those fired were actually top performers, according to their department supervisors. And here's where it gets even wilder. Some of these people had been aggressively recruited from better paying jobs, only to get the boot in what's clearly a politically motivated purge. Trump's team is calling this government efficiency. And Elon Musk, who's involved in the effort through the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is pushing for even bigger cuts. Yup, you heard that right. Musk is now playing a role in deciding who stays and who goes in the federal workforce. His words: we need to delete entire agencies. Now, let's talk impact. One of the biggest red flags here is that they're cutting 130 people from CISA, the agency that helps protect U.S. elections from cyber threats. Now, why would you weaken your country's top cybersecurity agency? Meanwhile, FEMA just lost 200 employees, including top policy advisors. Why does that matter? Because we're heading into hurricane season, and FEMA is literally the agency that steps in when disasters strike. And USCIS, the agency that processes citizenship, green card, and asylum applications, also saw major cuts. These USCIS cuts are going to cause major delays in processing immigration applications, including DACA renewals. If you or someone you know is a DACA recipient, now is the time to pay close attention. This could mean that wait times are about to get even worse and could potentially lead to DACA recipients losing work permits or facing lapses in protection, putting lives and livelihoods at risk. The administration claims this will save $50 million, but Let's be real. When has mass firing experienced workers ever made things more efficient? Instead, this just looks like a push to weaken agencies that handle immigration, disaster relief, and election security. Oh, and surprise, Trump's immigration enforcement agencies, CBP and ICE, yeah, they weren't touched. This is just the beginning. Trump signed an executive order telling agencies to plan for large-scale reductions, meaning more firings are still on the way. So again, the best thing to do is obviously to stay informed, keep an eye on how this affects our community, and of course, most importantly, don't let fear keep you silent. And that wraps up today's deep dive into the week's biggest immigration stories. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leo podcast for more updates. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and a special thanks to our Patreon supporters for making this show possible. If you learned something new from this episode, please don't forget to follow, rate, and share the podcast. I'm Kevin Munoz. I'll catch you in the next episode. And as always, mi gente, stay informed and stay empowered.